Critical thinking is the study of clear and unclear thinking. It is primarily used in the field of education, and not in psychology. The National Council for Excellence in Critical Thinking defines critical thinking as the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from, or generated by, observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication, as a guide to belief and action. Etymology: one sense of the term critical means crucial, or highly important. A second sense derives from II to the first IOI, which means able to discern. Various definitions: critical thinking has been defined as the process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information to reach an answer or conclusion. Disciplined thinking that is clear, rational, open-minded, and informed by evidence. Reasonable reflective thinking focused on deciding what to believe or do. Purposeful, self-regulatory judgment which results in interpretation, analysis, evaluation, and inference, as well as explanation of the evidential, conceptual, methodological, criteriological, or contextual considerations upon which that judgment is based. Includes a commitment to using reason in the formulation of our beliefs. In critical social theory, commitment to the social and political practice of participatory democracy, willingness to imagine or remain open to considering alternative perspectives, willingness to integrate new or revised perspectives into our ways of thinking and acting, and willingness to foster criticality in others. The skill and propensity to engage in an activity with reflective skepticism, disciplined, self-directed thinking which exemplifies the perfection of thinking appropriate to a particular mode of domain of thinking, thinking about one's thinking in a manner designed to organize and clarify, raise the efficiency of, and recognize errors and biases in one's own thinking. Critical thinking is not hard thinking nor is it directed at solving problems. Critical thinking is inward-directed with the intent of maximizing the rationality of the thinker. One does not use critical thinking to solve problems, one uses critical thinking to improve one's process of thinking. Skills: the list of core critical thinking skills includes observation, interpretation, analysis, inference, evaluation, explanation, and metacognition. According to Reynolds, an individual or group engaged in a strong way of critical thinking gives due consideration to establish, for instance, evidence through observation, context skills to isolate the problem from context, relevant criteria for making the judgment well, applicable methods or techniques for forming the judgment, applicable theoretical constructs for understanding the problem and the question at hand. In addition to possessing strong critical thinking skills, one must be disposed to engage problems and decisions using those skills. Critical thinking employs not only logic but broad intellectual criteria such as clarity, credibility, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, significance, and fairness. Procedure: critical thinking calls for the ability to recognize problems, to find workable means for meeting those problems, understand the importance of prioritization and order of precedence in problem-solving, gather and marshal pertinent information, recognize unstated assumptions and values, comprehend and use language with accuracy, clarity, and discernment, interpret data, to appraise evidence and evaluate arguments, recognize the existence of logical relationships between propositions, draw warranted conclusions and generalizations, put to test the conclusions and generalizations at which one arrives, reconstruct one's patterns of beliefs on the basis of wider experience, render accurate judgments about specific things and qualities. In everyday life, in sum, a persistent effort to examine any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the evidence that supports or refutes it and the further conclusions to which it tends. Habits or traits of mind: the habits of mind that characterize a person strongly disposed toward critical thinking include a desire to follow reason and evidence wherever they may lead, a systematic approach to problem-solving, inquisitiveness, even-handedness, and confidence in reasoning. According to a definition analysis by Kampf and Bond, critical thinking involves problem-solving, decision-making, metacognition, rationality, rational thinking, reasoning, knowledge, intelligence and also a moral component such as reflective thinking. Critical thinkers therefore need to have reached a level of maturity in their development, possess a certain attitude as well as a set of taught skills. Research. Edward Glaser proposed that the ability to think critically involves three elements: an attitude of being disposed to consider in a thoughtful way the problems and subjects that come within the range of one's experiences, knowledge of the methods of logical inquiry and reasoning, some skill in applying those methods. Educational programs aimed at developing critical thinking in children and adult learners, individually or in group problem-solving and decision-making contexts, continue to address these same three central elements. Contemporary cognitive psychology regards human reasoning as a complex process that is both reactive and reflective. The relationship between critical thinking skills and critical thinking dispositions is an empirical question. Some people have both in abundance, some have skills but not the disposition to use them, some are disposed but lack strong skills, and some have neither. A measure of critical thinking dispositions is the California measure of mental motivation. In schooling, John Dewey is one of many educational leaders who recognized that a curriculum aimed at building thinking skills would benefit the individual learner, the community, and the entire democracy. Critical thinking is significant in academics due to being significant in learning. Critical thinking is significant in the learning process of internalization, in the construction of basic ideas, principles, and theories inherent in content. And critical thinking is significant in the learning process of application, whereby those ideas, principles, and theories are implemented effectively as they become relevant in learners' lives. Good teachers cultivate critical thinking at every stage of learning, including initial learning. This process of intellectual engagement is at the heart of the Oxford, Durham, Cambridge and London School of Economics tutorials. The tutor questions the students, often in a Socratic manner. The key is that the teacher who fosters critical thinking fosters reflectiveness in students by asking questions that stimulate thinking essential to the construction of knowledge. Each discipline adapts its use of critical thinking concepts and principles. The core concepts are always there, but they are embedded in subject-specific content. For students to learn content, intellectual engagement is crucial. All students must do their own thinking, their own construction of knowledge. Good teachers recognize this and therefore focus on the questions, readings, activities that stimulate the mind to take ownership of key concepts and principles underlying the subject. In the UK school system, critical thinking is offered as a subject that 16 to 18-year-olds can take as an A-level. Under the OCR exam board, students can sit 2 exam papers for the AS, credibility of evidence, and assessing and developing argument. The full advanced GCE is now available. In addition to the 2 AS units, candidates sit the 2 papers resolution of dilemmas, and critical reasoning. The A-level tests candidates on their ability to think critically about, and analyze, arguments on their deductive or inductive validity, as well as producing their own arguments. It also tests their ability to analyze certain related topics such as credibility and ethical decision-making. However, due to its comparative lack of subject content, many universities do not accept it as a main A-level for admissions. Nevertheless, the AS is often useful in developing reasoning skills, and the full advanced GCE is useful for degree courses in politics, philosophy, history or theology, providing the skills required for critical analysis that are useful, for example, in biblical study. There used to also be an advanced extension award offered in critical thinking in the UK, open to any A-level student regardless of whether they have the critical thinking A-level. Cambridge International Examinations have an A-level in thinking skills. From 2008, Assessment and Qualifications Alliance has also been offering an A-level critical thinking specification. OCR Exam Board have also modified theirs for 2008. Many examinations for university entrance set by universities, on top of A-level examinations, also include a critical thinking component, such as the LNAT, the UKCAT, the Biomedical Admissions Test and the Thinking Skills Assessment. In its 2012 platform, the Republican Party of Texas rejected the teaching of higher-order thinking skills. critical thinking skills and similar programs, giving as a reason that this sort of teaching has the purpose of challenging the student's fixed beliefs and undermining parental authority. Media ridicule led to a response from a PT Communications director Chris Elam that the inclusion of the term critical thinking skills was an oversight which cannot be corrected until 2014, when the next state convention will occur. In Qatar, critical thinking was offered by Al Barak, which is an outreach, non-traditional educational program that targets high school students and focuses on a curriculum based on STEM fields. The idea behind Al Barak is to offer high school students the opportunity to connect with the research environment in the Center for Advanced Materials at Qatar University. Faculty members train and mentor the students and help develop and enhance their critical thinking, problem-solving, and teamwork skills. Instruction effectiveness. In 1995, a meta-analysis of the literature on teaching effectiveness in higher education was undertaken. The study noted concerns from higher education, politicians and business that higher education was failing to meet society's requirements for well-educated citizens. It concluded that although faculty may aspire to develop students' thinking skills, in practice they have tended to aim at facts and concepts utilizing lowest levels of cognition, rather than developing intellect or values. Importance. Critical thinking is an important element of all professional fields and academic disciplines. Within the framework of scientific skepticism, the process of critical thinking involves the careful acquisition and interpretation of information and use of it to reach a well-justified conclusion. The concepts and principles of critical thinking can be applied to any context or case but only by reflecting upon the nature of that application. Critical thinking forms, therefore, a system of related, and overlapping, modes of thought such as anthropological thinking, sociological thinking, historical thinking, political thinking, psychological thinking, philosophical thinking, mathematical thinking, chemical thinking, biological thinking, ecological thinking, legal thinking, ethical thinking, musical thinking, thinking like a painter, sculptor, engineer, business person, etc. In other words, though critical thinking principles are universal, their application to disciplines requires a process of reflective contextualization. Critical thinking is considered important in the academic fields because it enables one to analyze, evaluate, explain, and restructure their thinking, thereby decreasing the risk of adopting, acting on, or thinking with, a false belief. However, even with knowledge of the methods of logical inquiry and reasoning, mistakes can happen due to a thinker's inability to apply the methods or because of character traits such as egocentrism. Critical thinking includes identification of prejudice, bias, propaganda, self-deception, distortion, misinformation, etc. Given research in cognitive psychology, some educators believe that schools should focus on teaching their students critical thinking skills and cultivation of intellectual traits. Socratic method is defined as a prolonged series of questions and answers which refutes a moral assertion by leading an opponent to draw a conclusion that contradicts his own viewpoint. Critical thinking skills through Socratic method taught in schools help create leaders. Instructors that promote critical thinking skills can benefit the students by increasing their confidence and creating a repeatable thought process to question and confidently approach a solution. Students also accomplish followership skills that can be used to probe the leader's foundations. Critical thinking skills through Socratic method serve to produce professionals that are self-governing. However, Socratic method for critical thinking skills can become confusing if an instructor or leader uses the method too rigidly. The student may not know what the instructor or leader wants from him. An instructor or leader may disillusion the students if he uses particular style of questioning. Instructors must reveal their reasoning behind the questions in order to guide the students in the right direction. Socratic method can serve 21st-century leaders to instruct students, mentor copyright gar copyright s, motivate followers, advise other leaders, and influence peers. Critical thinking skills can be used to help nurses during the assessment process. Through the use of critical thinking, nurses can question, evaluate, and reconstruct the nursing care process by challenging the established theory and practice. Critical thinking skills can help nurses problem solve, reflect, and make a conclusive decision about the current situation they face. Critical thinking creates new possibilities for the development of the nursing knowledge. Due to the sociocultural, environmental, and political issues that are affecting healthcare delivery, it would be helpful to embody new techniques in nursing. Nurses can also engage their critical thinking skills through the Socratic method of dialogue and reflection. This practice standard is even part of some regulatory organizations such as the College of Nurses of Ontario, Professional Standards for Continuing Competencies. It requires nurses to engage in reflective practice and keep records of this continued professional development for possible review by the college. Critical thinking also is considered important for human rights education for toleration. The Declaration of Principles on Tolerance adopted by UNESCO in 1995 affirms that education for tolerance could aim at countering factors that lead to fear and exclusion of others, and could help young people to develop capacities for independent judgment, critical thinking and ethical reasoning. Critical thinking is used as a way of deciding whether a claim is true, partially true, or false. It is a tool by which one can come about reasoned conclusions based on a reasoned process. See also, Notes. References, Le Cornu, Allison. Meaning, Internalization and Externalization, Towards a Fuller Understanding of the Process of Reflection and Its Role in the Construction of the Self. Adult Education Quarterly 59, 279 euro 297 doi, 10.1177/0741713609331478. Further reading, C. de Blom, J. and Paulson, D.W. Critical Reasoning, Understanding and Criticizing Arguments and Theories, 6th Eden, College of Nurses of Ontario. Professional Standards, Continuing Competencies, Damer, T. Edward. Attacking Faulty Reasoning, 6th edition, Wadsworth. ISBN 0-534-60516-8, Dow, Francis Watanabe. Critical Thinking, An Introduction to Reasoning, 1989, ISBN 978-0-19-50, 4884-1, Fashion, pages 2007. Critical Thinking, What It Is and Why It Counts. A Euro 2007 update, Fisher, Alec and Scriven, Michael. Critical Thinking, Its Definition and Assessment, Center for Research in Critical Thinking /Edge Press. ISBN 0-9531796-0-5, Hamby, B.W. The Philosophy of Anything, Critical Thinking in Context. Kendall Hunt Publishing Company, Dubuque, Iowa. ISBN 978-0-7575-4724-9, Vincent F. Hendricks. Thought to Talk, A Crash Course in Reflection and Expression, New York, Automatic Press/VIP. ISBN 87-991-013-7-8, Kompf, M., and Bond, R. Critical Reflection in Adult Education. In T. Berestein and M. Kompf, eds. The Craft of Teaching Adults. Toronto, Ontario, Irwin. McPeck, J. Thoughts on Subject Specificity. In S. Norris, The Generalizability of Critical Thinking. New York, Teachers College Press. Moore, Brooke Noel and Parker, Richard. Critical Thinking. 10th ed. Published by McGraw-Hill. ISBN 0-07-803-828-6. Mulnix, J. W. Thinking Critically About Critical Thinking. Educational Philosophy and Theory doi, 10.1111 per Joule 1469-58 12.20 10.00673x. Paul, R. Teaching Critical Thinking in the Strong Sense, A Focus on Self-Deception, Worldviews and a Dialectical Mode of Analysis. Informal Logic Newsletter 4, 2-7. Paul, Richard. Critical Thinking, How to Prepare Students for a Rapidly Changing World. 4th ed. Foundation for Critical Thinking. ISBN 0-944583-09-1. Paul, Richard and Elder, Linda. Critical Thinking Tools for Taking Charge of Your Learning and Your Life, New Jersey, Prentice Hall Publishing. ISBN 0-13-114962-8. Poor, Richard. Elder, Linda. Critical Thinking, Tools for Taking Charge of Your Professional and Personal Life. Published by Financial Times Prentice Hall. ISBN 0-13-064760-8. Pavlidis, Pericles. Critical Thinking as Dialectics, a Hegelian Marxist Approach. Journal for Critical Education Policy Studies Vol. 8, 2, Reynolds, Martin. Critical Thinking and Systems Thinking, Towards a Critical Literacy for Systems Thinking in Practice. 37-68. Theodore Skick and Lewis Vaughan, How to Think About Weird Things, Critical Thinking for a New Age. ISBN 0-7674-2048-9, Twiddy, Charles. Their argument maps improve critical thinking. Teaching Philosophy 27 June 2, 2004. Van den Brink Budgen, Are Critical Thinking for Students, How to Books. ISBN 978-1-84528-386-5. White, J. Bad Thoughts, A Guide to Clear Thinking, Corvo. ISBN 0-9543255-3-2. Zieganik, B.V. Unfinished and Unfinished Tasks. In English translation edited by Willis D. Eliza. With an introduction by Kurt Kofka. A Sourcebook of Gestalt Psychology. Ziv. 403 PLA. 22 cm Highland, NY, Gestalt Journal Press. This Gestalt Journal Press edition is a verbatim reprint of the book as originally published in 1938. TP. Verso. ISBN 9780939266302. OCLCA 38755142, external links, quotations related to critical thinking at Weicker. Quote, Critical Thinking at Phil Papers, Critical Thinking at the Indiana Philosophy Ontology Project, Informal Logic entry in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Critical Thinking at DMOZ, Critical Thinking Web. Online tutorials and teaching material on critical thinking. Critical Thinking, What Is It Good For? By Howard Gabenesh, Skeptical Inquirer magazine. The Watson Glaser Critical Thinking Appraisal. An independent critical evaluation, asking the right question. A Guide to Critical Thinking, a book written by M. Neil Brown and Stuart M. Keeley. What Critical Means in Critical Thinking by Donald Jenner. Critical Thinking Means Business. A Guide to Developing Critical Thinking Ability by Pearson Mardy. Critical Thinking Academy website. Logical Self-Defense. The author's conviction that this material is deeply important and should be accessible to as wide an audience as possible. Fact-Checking Rumors, also known as the Urban Legends Reference Pages, is a website covering urban legends, internet rumors, email forwards, and other stories of unknown or questionable origin. It is a well-known resource for validating and debunking such stories in American popular culture, receiving 300,000 visits a day. The intention of this website's creators is not merely to dismiss or confirm misconceptions and rumors, but to provide evidence for such debunkings and confirmation as well. Where appropriate, pages are generally marked undetermined, or unverifiable if it is felt there is not enough evidence to either support or disprove a given claim. U.S. Politics Fact-Checking, National Council for Excellence in Critical Thinking website.